All right, good deal. I know we've got some folks that are kind of walking in, getting settled in, but in the interest of time, I do want to make sure that we get through everything that we're here to cover today. So my name is Chase Cookson. I'm a campus and faculty development specialist with the IDEA Center. I'm actually based out of Kansas City, Missouri. Manhattan's based out of, IDEA is based out of Manhattan, Kansas. I know many of you I actually got a chance to meet in person the last time I was out there. I think back in May of last year was we were talking about the transition to the online system, what that was going to look like, and we were also talking about reports and things like that while I was out there. Today, what we're going to be covering is this new system. For many of you that have kind of gotten a general overview, some of the material that's presented today will be a little bit of a repeat, but the majority of it should be new stuff to you. I know for a lot of you, you've been using IDEA on paper for a long time. So conceptually, everything that I cover is going to be really similar. I'm just going to be trying to translate what you're used to doing on paper to what it's going to look like in this online environment. And this is kind of what it looks like, what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to provide you with a little bit of background information related to the instrument, some of the changes that have been made to the instrument. I'm going to show you what it looks like for a student to actually get into the system and respond to the surveys. That's really where we're going to start, is what it looks like for those folks. And we'll turn it around and we'll show you what it looks like for you. And if you're at a computer there in one of the rooms or at your home computer, you'll actually be able to follow along as we click through and look at some of the different features and things that you all have access to as faculty. The main thing I'm going to be showing you how to do today is showing you how to fill out your objective selection form, which is really similar to what you've done historically with your faculty information form, but it just looks a little bit different. I'll show you reports for just a second. We're going to have a separate session later in the semester once you actually have some reports where we really go in to a high level of detail into those reports, but I do want to give you just a sense of what those reports look like, primarily just to show you that everything that you're used to seeing in your paper reports still exists in these digital reports. Then also in today showing you a feature that you have access to that's a formative feedback instrument that you all are going to be able to use here over the coming semesters. So this is kind of what our agenda looks like today. We're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers towards the end of the session because we have kind of an interesting group here where we have multiple rooms and things like that. It may be difficult for you to get questions to me as we go. So I'm going to make sure that we cover all this material, and I'll make sure we've got about 20 minutes towards the end just for questions. So if you can hold questions until that time, we'll unmute everybody, turn on the video and all that stuff at the end of the session. And also, as I mentioned right at the beginning, for anybody that's just walking into the room right now or just got settled, we are recording today's session, so you're all going to have access to a recording following the session as well. All right, so let's get into it. Just a couple of basic, kind of background pieces of information. IDEA is a nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to improving teaching and learning in higher ed, principally through these three areas. The thing that we're talking about today, our student ratings of instruction instrument, is definitely our one of the things that we're most well known for. We've got a series of IDEA papers and other resources related to teaching and learning on the website, which I've got here up on the screen. Now, I put this this website up here pretty much every time I do one of these sessions, no matter what we're talking about. And the reason that I do that is these two resources are really yours. So you've got the IDEA website, where we have a lot of resources related to the things that I'm going to be covering today. So basically everything that I cover today, everything I talk about has a resource on the IDEA website associated with it. So just as an example, here in a minute, I'm going to be showing you how to select objectives within the system. But there's actually a short PDF on the website that also shows you how to do that. So my point there is just, although I encourage you to take notes as we're talking today, refer back to the recording later on, know also that there are a whole bunch of resources on the website if you ever get stuck. And then that second line there, that's me, that's my email address. I work directly with the College of Southern Maryland, and so you all have direct access to me if you'd ever have a question. So on the IDEA website, if you were to point a browser there at any point, the majority of our resources that are related to the student rating system fall under this tab, the Resources and Events tab. So if you ever get stuck, ever have a question, if you go to this website, that's where you'll find all of the resources that I was just mentioning. All right, so a real brief primer on how the IDEA system works before we get into the actual site itself and show you what that looks like. Like I said, for many of you, this is going to be a refresher. You've been using the system for a long time, but for any of you that might be newer faculty, this is essentially how the IDEA Student Ratings of Instruction instrument works. What we do is we ask faculty or the institution to provide us with a little bit of information at the outset. So what we need for the system to work is an identification of the types of learning objectives that are being targeted within a given course. So at your institution, this is done in a few different ways. In some departments, this is done at the individual faculty level, where faculty go in and make these selections. In other departments, other parts of the university, this is done by a committee of faculty essentially selecting the objectives and then having these loaded in on the back end. There's really a bunch of different ways this can be done, but my point here is that the system needs that input in order to generate the reports, because our philosophy at IDEA is that the best measure of teaching effectiveness is student progress on the objectives that are being targeted within a course. So the first thing that we need is to know which objectives are being targeted in the course. So that's the first thing that we do within the system, is we ask the institution and its faculty to tell us what kinds of learning objectives are being targeted in the course. Then we go to the students and we ask them their questions. So these are the kinds of questions that actually exist within the end of course survey. The first set of questions that we ask students about relate to those objectives I was just talking about. So there are 13 broad-based learning objectives, and we ask students to indicate on a scale of 1 to 5, how much progress did you make on those objectives? Second thing that we do is ask students for their observations of 19 different teaching methods. So we don't ask them to, report on the quality or the effectiveness of the teaching methods. We simply ask them to indicate how frequently they observe those teaching methods. We also ask a set of questions related to the course and the students themselves. So here in these questions, students respond, self-report things like their motivation to take the course, their level of background preparation, and then also tell us a little bit about the course, things like how difficult they found the subject matter. And we've got 2 global or summary items that we ask the students about as well, one dealing with teacher excellence and one dealing with course excellence. That's really it. Those are the four types of questions that we ask of students. And again, we use this information in conjunction with the objective selection to generate the reporting at the end. All of that reporting is dependent upon both the selection of the objectives and the responses that students have provided. And we'll dig into this a little bit more, but just as an example, one of the things that we do is make some formative recommendations based on the objectives that were indicated as important or essential and how much progress students made on those objectives, how frequently given teaching methods were observed. All of that input generates these formative recommendations that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So you get that basic formative reporting that you're used to seeing on the 3rd page of your report. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail here when we get to the reports part of the session today. And you also get some basic numerical information similar to what you used to see on the 1st page of your report. So one note here for any of you that are logged in individually at your computer, you'll probably note that you have the ability to use a little chat box. Don't hesitate to use that while I'm talking. If you put a question in there, I can see it. I know that may be a little bit more difficult for some of you that are in a room. You can't just walk up to the computer and type that in. But for any of you that are logged in individually, if you have a question, type it into the chat. I will get to it. I'll see it every couple minutes. I'll be checking there. So that's kind of the basic concept of how the system works. It's also important to note that there have been some changes to the instrument itself. So you all right now just went through or are going through this transition to an online system, but you'll notice some differences in the instrument itself. So just a real quick history lesson on the IDEA instrument itself. It was initially designed back in the mid-70s. The version of the instrument that you all have been using up until this semester was last revised in 1999, and a lot's changed since 1999 in higher ed, and so there really was a pretty significant need for us to revise the instrument. So we embarked on a multi-year process to do that, really launched it in 2015. You all will be using that new instrument this semester and moving forward. We approach this revision just like we have historically whenever we're looking at the instrument. We go in and we look at the data that we've collected, millions and millions of course sections, over the last, well, since 1999. We see if anything's changed. We see if there are any differences in the relationships that we're seeing between, for instance, the teaching that's being observed in the class and the kind of learning that's being reported. And all of that feeds back into, the revision itself. Go to the professional literature. And we also try to make it a central goal to align the items with professional and accreditation criteria. So the instrument aligns with, the professional standards that are out there, a variety of them, as well as each of the 6 regional accrediting bodies criteria as well. The end result of that revision was that we were able to reduce the number of items within the instrument. So we're actually able to take some of the items out. So we've reduced the survey burden on students from 47 to 40 items in the full diagnostic form. We've added some teaching methods, learning objectives, made some changes. What I'll do following the session today is send along a brief overview of those changes for anybody that's interested in what those changes are specifically. Yeah, and so I'm going to back up for just one second because we had a question come in that relates to the learning objectives themselves. So the question that was asked from David is, are students asked to rate progress on all 13 objectives as they did on the bubble sheets, or only the ones that the instructor chooses? It's a great question. So that's exactly the same as it used to be. So historically, if you're not aware, students have always responded to all of the objectives, irrespective of whether or not you've indicated they're relevant to the course. So that still happens. So when you go in and select your objectives here in the system, your students are going to respond to even those that you've indicated are minor. They'll respond to all 13 of them, indicating the amount of progress that they've made on that objective. So this is one of the ways that we validate the instrument. Students should make more progress on those items that are being targeted than the ones that they're not. That said, we are still having some internal discussions about whether or not we want to continue to do that. There are a number of other ways that we've validated the instrument, and so that part of the process may not be as necessary. And you can imagine if we were to take those minor objectives out, it would be a shorter survey for students. So, but brief answer to you, David, is that yeah, currently students still respond to all 13. And here I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. I'm going to pop into the chat window just to see if there are any other questions before I start getting into what it looks like for students. All right, not seeing any other questions there yet. All right, so before we show you what it looks like for you, I think it's helpful to just see what this looks like for students. Since this is online, it's different. You know, we're used to seeing the bubble sheets. We can feel them, we can touch them, but because most of us aren't students at our institutions, we may never get to see what it looks like from the student perspective unless we spend this time. So let's take a minute to do that now. So when students get into the system, they're typically going to be notified by email. So at your institution, there's a lot of flexibility in how this can be done, but what's going to happen is students are going to be notified by email. They're also going to be able to get into the surveys directly from within the learning management system itself also. So there's a link embedded within there that they can click on. But just as an example, if they got the email, it'll point them to the URL where they actually need to go to log in. For your students, when they log in, they're going to see a screen that looks like this. You guys have seen this screen before. It's actually a screen that you all see as well, but they're using their same campus credentials to get in. So they don't need another username or password or anything like that. So that's just important to keep in mind if a student asks you, well, you know, how do I actually get in? Same username, same password that they're using to get into everything else on campus. So now, then we just have to keep our fingers crossed that they know what that username and password is, right? Once they're in the system, depending on the kind of device they're using, it may look a little different. So this website that they're logging into has an adaptive design, meaning it can display on any type of screen. So what I have up in front of you is an example on the left of what it looks like for a student who has just logged in on a traditional device, like a laptop, traditional desktop machine. On the right is what that would look like if they logged in on a mobile phone. So the reason that I stress this mobile view is that one of the single biggest predictors of a high response rate for an institution using online surveys is whether or not faculty devote in-class time for students to take the surveys. Students can respond to these on any device, tablet, mobile, laptop, and so you can still devote in-class time and essentially treat the process just like paper. Again, it'll look a little bit different here again on the left, a desktop, on the right, what it looks like when they log in on a mobile device. And then when they're taking the survey, let's say they've clicked start for one of the surveys. It looks kind of similar to the bubble sheets if they're taking it on a laptop. And then on the mobile device, you can see it's the same kind of question, same kind of bubble selection, just a slightly different layout. So this is what it looks like for students who are actually responding to the items in those different kinds of formats. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit just in case anybody in the back has any trouble seeing that. So again, this is what it looks like for a student to respond to the items on a traditional machine, and then over here on the right, what it looks like if they're on a mobile device. It's fairly intuitive. I'll be honest with you, most students, most of our students don't need much in the way of guidance on how to navigate through this system, partially because there's just not a lot of places for them to go. They get into the system, all they can really do there is take surveys. There's not really anything else they can do. So questions come in related to whether or not students need an app to access this. They do not. So this is what's referred to as a hosted solution, meaning there's no software to download or anything like that. That goes for you all as well. There's no additional software or anything like that that you need. You just need to log into the website to do everything that we're talking about here today. And that goes for your students as well. Great question. Thanks for asking that. But yeah, so that's kind of what it looks like. There's not a lot to show for students because there's not a lot of places for them to go. It's a little different for you as faculty. We're going to spend a lot more time showing you the inner workings of your system here in just a second. And I'm just going to pop into the chat real quick to see if any other questions have come in as we were looking at the student view before I show you what it looks like for you all. And this will be the fun part where if you're at a computer, you're welcome to follow along. Doesn't look like we have any other questions yet, so we'll keep trucking along. All right, so for you, if you serve in a faculty role, you have this link that's up here at the top. It's pretty easy to remember. It's csmd.campuslabs.com/faculty, and I'm going to pull that up just a little bit larger for everybody. That's that link right there. So if you do want to follow along as we go through these next slides, you know, you're welcome to log in here. You're going to use your same campus credentials to log in. Now, fair warning, because we have a large group here today, if you're running into any issues logging in or anything like that, we'll have to defer resolving those to following the session. So just full disclosure there. But many of you will probably be able to log in and poke around a little bit within the system. If you don't know your login or anything like that, don't worry about it. You can follow along with me and you're going to have access to the recording later on. It's important to note that you all are going to be directed to this site over the coming semester. So typically what will happen is you're going to receive an email, for instance, when it's time for you to fill out your objective selection form. what you're used to filling out as that green faculty information form. You'll also typically receive an email, for instance, when reports have been released to you at the end of the semester. Now, you can receive other emails from the system if you're taking advantage of some of the other optional features. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, but those are the basic kinds of emails that you'll be receiving essentially when it's time for you to view your reports or it's time for you to do something in the system. So let's get in. Let's actually look at this thing and see what it looks like. I'm going to log into a sandbox and show you all what it looks like from my end. Now, obviously, my view is going to look a little bit different than yours because I've just got some fake data that we've put into the site, but it should give you a sense of how I'm moving around. All right, so for me, you can see I'm here at my IDEA EDU portal, and I'm logging in. I am Dr. Sample Instructor today. When I log in, I'm going to be brought to a dashboard that looks like this. Yours is going to look similar. It's going to have the same kind of ribbon across the top. It'll have your name. You'll have some basic things that you can do, like go back to previous terms once you've accumulated additional terms worth of data here in the system. At the end of the semester, you'll be able to do things like look at your summary reports and things like that. You won't be able to do that until you actually have reports in the system. So some of these things may not show up for you yet because your students haven't provided feedback yet. One basic thing that I want to show you before anything else is there is a technical support page. If you are ever stuck within the site, you're getting an error or something like that, if you click on your name in the top right corner, you'll see this link that says support. Now, there are folks available by email, phone, and chat up until 8 p.m. Eastern time. And so you have the ability to actually interact with a human if you're running into a technical issue. Your students will see this as well. So generally, a lot of the technical support stuff, you can always just direct them to the support team here. Don't feel like you need to troubleshoot their issues or anything. We can do that end. Oh, and then of course you also have the ability to sign out, especially for those of you who are in a room with a shared computer right now. That's always important to do when you get out of the system. Don't forget to sign out, just like anything. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to do here in the system is select your objectives. So when you scroll down, you'll see a list of courses for which surveys are going to be administered. You'll see the view results button if the survey's been completed. And if it hasn't been completed yet, you'll see that it's active. You'll see how many months, days, etc. are remaining. And you'll have the ability to go in and select objectives using this form. Now I'm going to speak really to a few different audiences as I talk about this objective selection form. I'm going to click into it while I talk. So depending on your department, you may or may not be selecting these objectives yourself. You'll have to rely on your department chair for that guidance. In some departments there at the college, what is going to be happening is the objectives are going to be set on the back end and essentially locked for you, which means you'll go in here, you'll be able to see the objectives, and you'll get a note that they've been selected by the administrator. So some of you may be in the system and see something like that right now. At least for this first semester, I know that's the case. There may be changes to that here over the coming semesters as you all decide what you want to do long term. But in other departments, you won't see this. You won't see that they've been set, and you'll actually need to select them yourself by clicking through and making those selections. So it's kind of similar to what you're used to doing on the paper faculty information form, that green form where you'd fill out the bubbles. Here, instead, what you're doing is just selecting the objectives by clicking on them. One thing that's slightly different about this interactive form is the learning objective notes are actually embedded here. So for instance, if I click on the learning objectives link here, you're going to see that it's going to take me to the IDEA notes on learning. which provides a brief overview of the process that we're talking about right now, but also talks a little bit more about what that should look like, not just the mechanics of it, but some things to think about when you select those objectives. And then of course, you'll also have access to the learning objective notes, which cover essentially where these objectives come from, what they mean, etc. And so if you're choosing one, it would probably be a good idea to go in and take a couple minutes to review these notes. We'll talk about the notes on teaching here in a little bit, but it's just important to note they're embedded directly within this form. Now I'm going to go into another one here. I believe I've got one that is not selected. So, okay, so I've just clicked into another one of these to select objectives. And here I'm going to show you what it actually looks like to select them. So for instance, what I've just done is went through and selected a number of these as important or essential. So you can see I've got 2 essential objectives selected and 3 that are important. The rest of these are minor. So going back to when we were talking about the fact that students respond to all 13 of these objectives, it's important to note that when my reports are being generated, when the numbers are actually being calculated, students' responses to any of these items that I've selected as minor do not get included. Only student feedback on those objectives that have been selected as important or essential are going to get included in those scores. Essentially, all of their feedback on the minor objectives drops out. Once you're done making your selections, the modern equivalent of turning in that green faculty information form is clicking Save. Once you do that, you'll get notification that your objective selection form was successfully saved. And then you're done. You can go back and look at some of the other things here. So that's all you have to do for your objective selection form. You'll notice a couple things that are different, right? Obviously, it's not a paper form. That one's pretty straightforward, but you'll also notice that there are fewer questions. So you used to have to provide a lot more information in filling out that form. So if you're thinking about that form now, think about some of the research questions that got asked on the form, or some of the demographic things that we asked about. So right now, a lot of that information actually comes over from your student information system. So some of the things that IDEA researches, like class characteristics and their effect on learning, those are all coming over from your student information systems in many cases. Now, there is likely going to be a time at the future where you will answer other types of questions as part of the objective selection process, as IDEA looks to and prioritizes what kinds of research we want to do moving forward. But just a note there that you'll notice there are a lot fewer questions. A couple of the other things that you have the ability to do from this screen is view your course roster, so you can essentially make sure that it's accurate or up to date. Now, these updates to your class roster are happening on an ongoing basis, so that is one thing that's kind of nice about the system, is as students are dropping and withdrawing, that thing is getting updated, so that ultimately you don't have students responding to the surveys that aren't in your class anymore. From here, a couple of the other places that you can go exist up here at the top. So I'm going to show you how to add custom questions to your surveys, and you can do that using this banner above. So if you click on course evaluation questions, it's going to take you to a screen that looks like this. So if you're following along, go ahead and do that and see if you've got your courses listed here. Here from this page, if you have course sections that are upcoming, as you can see down here at the bottom, you'll have the ability to view/edit the evaluation. For any surveys that have already been completed, obviously you can't add questions to those. They've already went out to students, and so you can't add questions. But for any of these that are in the future, you have the ability to add these questions. Now, you can add these questions up until students start taking the survey. You can do that with your objective selections as well. So you can actually do that fairly last minute. I'd encourage you to not wait. When it's fresh in your mind, get in there and add these questions. And you do that by clicking into this View/Edit Evaluation button. When you do that, on the left-hand side of the screen, what you're going to see are the hard-coded questions. Many of you are probably familiar with this from the paper forms, but the core set of idea questions are unalterable. They are hard-coded into the system. Every question gets asked. You cannot remove or alter those. And one of the nice benefits of having those common questions is you get some nice things like comparison information. You know you're working with valid, reliable questions, etc. But one of the downsides is that when you use a common instrument, it can't possibly capture all of the unique informational needs of a given course, a department, even an institution often. And so because of that, these custom questions over here kind of fill that gap. So you add these can be added at the faculty level, at the department or college level, really at any level within the organizational hierarchy, these can be added. But for you, if you have a specific question that you want to ask, you just click Edit here. You can see I've already added a couple. And then if you want to add one, you just click New here. Now there's really two kinds of questions: a single select, which is what many of us would refer to as a scaled response or Likert type question, where students have a single option that they are responding to. You also have the option of adding a text entry, which is just an open-ended comment box. So here on the screen, you see those two options, but you also see two examples, one of a single select question, one of a open-ended question that I've added. Let's say I wanted to add another qualitative question. I just click on that and I type in the question text here. I can add some things like, I can bold it, do some formatting and things like that, but really the basic feature here is just, selecting the question, adding the question itself. And you'd click OK once that was done. I'm going to click cancel to back out and not add one. Same thing for the single select. If you wanted to add one of those, you would click in here, add the question text above, and then add your answers down here in the second box. You can see that it specifically asks you to place one answer per line. So if you have 5 possible responses, you'd have 5 lines there. So that's just the mechanics of the custom questions, but there is there's 2 documents that I'm going to send along for distribution following this session that cover best practices in creating these questions. So you'll often find that the quality of the information that you get back with custom questions, especially your qualitative questions, is a function of how specific they are and some other question attributes. But I've got a couple of documents that I think are really helpful in thinking about the kinds of questions that you want to ask. And IDEA also has dozens and dozens of these questions that have essentially been vetted by our research team for different kinds of classroom settings that you can just kind of pick and choose from yourself as well. And I'll send that along following this session. But once you've added the questions that you want to have within the survey, you just click Done Editing. You'll see them over here with any other custom questions. And that's also how you can check and make sure that they're going to be part of the survey. I'm clicking back to get back to the home page. You'll notice also, though, you can always get back to this dashboard by just clicking home up here in the ribbon. I'm going to check in that chat box real quick just to make sure we haven't had any questions come in as we've been talking about custom questions. None so far. All right, and we're still doing good on time. We're going to have plenty of time for questions here at the end as well. So all right, we've covered objective selection. We've covered the course evaluation questions themselves. I'm going to show you what a report looks like. We're going to cover this really briefly. And again, we are going to go into a lot of detail into these reports once you have some reports available in the system. My goal here in showing you these reports is just to give you a sense of what they look like. I know for some of you who attended a previous session, you may have seen a couple of these screenshots, but we're going to go in and kind of click around. So I'm going to click View Results, and this is what you're going to end up doing at the end of the semester, where you'll go in and actually view the feedback that you've gotten back. So the biggest change here from your paper reports is the way that we're presenting the information. Historically, you've flipped pages, right? You've had a physical document in front of you. You've went from page 1 to page 2, from page 2 to page 3 to look at your information. And what we've done here is organize that information in a tabular format based on what it is essentially. So you got some basic tabs up here. They're kind of like the pages that you used to have. The other thing that's different is in the paper reports, we had to surface up a lot of information just all at once. You know, just that's the nature of working with a paper static document. But here in the online system, you'll notice that as you move across and do things, things will light up or a tooltip will pop out. And the reason for that is if it's lighting up or providing some additional information, there's a reason. So like here, this box lights up because this average that I'm looking at has underlying information. So if I click into it, I get to see the numbers that roll up into those averages. Same thing goes for the raw and adjusted averages and the comparison groups. Historically, what we've done is present you with all of this information at once, which can be really overwhelming, to be quite honest. And so what we've done here is just giving you some toggles so you can choose what it is that you want to look at. So if you want to compare to your discipline or your institution, whatever it is, you have the control in what's on the screen. Those are the primary differences. You're getting the same information, so I'll tell you real quickly what this is, just so you have some context. The summative tab is page 1 of your paper reports, same information. Formative tab is the 3rd page of your paper reports, same information, just a little more interactive. And as I noted earlier, the notes on learning are directly embedded within the formative recommendations, which is really cool. That's a great feature. The quantitative tab is just like what you used to see on the 4th page of your report, where you get the underlying statistical detail. This is where you get all of the student responses, can see the distribution and all that stuff if you really want to dig into it. The qualitative tab are your open-ended qualitative comments, historically typed up by someone there at the institution and distributed. Nice thing about this is you see them here. Nobody in the administrative offices is typing these. This is just what students are providing. And so far, our experience with institutions transitioning from paper to the online system is that it's very much in alignment with most of the research that's been done on this topic. Students provide much lengthier substantive comments when asked to do so digitally versus in a handwritten form, probably for a whole bunch of reasons. But I know if you guys are anything like me, the qualitative portion of my reports is really important to me. And so I love seeing that, those lengthy comments. You've got one tool here that you didn't used to have. It's called a segment comparison. I will be covering this in detail when we go through this in the report section, but I'll give you a brief description of what it is, just for the curious out there. Basically, it allows you to compare student responses in your course for a single question to other units within the organization, as long as there's sufficient information to generate a comparison, basically to keep things anonymous. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we do report training, but I just call it out because it is something that you have not historically had access to on your paper reports. So for an individual course section, that's what the reports look like. Again, we'll spend a full hour on this, talking about what the numbers mean here at the end of the semester. You also get some aggregate reporting out of the system now that we'll spend some time on in that session, but just to give you a sense of what that looks like. You now have some longitudinal reporting, which will allow you to track student responses across time, which is very much in alignment with IDEA's philosophy that these data points are most meaningful. The student feedback is most meaningful when we look across time and across courses. Ignore the outliers, essentially. And you have that reporting now. You also noted or heard me note that there are these summary reports that you have access to at the end of a semester. These are similar to the longitudinal reports, but these are going to be reports that cover how students responded to a given item across your courses instead of across time. So for instance, if you want to see if there is consistency in how students respond to a question across your courses, you now have a way to do that without flipping back and forth between multiple individual course reports. So we can look for trends. We can now see if a given course is an outlier with respect to how students are responding to an item. So just some summary reporting essentially that's built into the system that just wasn't part of a paper-based report. So some things to look forward to, I suppose. The final thing that I want to show you before I turn it over to you all for questions is this feedback tool in the top right ribbon. The feedback tool is a formative feedback instrument. Everything we've been talking about up to this point has dealt with your end of course surveys. This is not an end of course survey. This is an anytime survey that faculty have access to. You control it. So if you want to start one of these sessions, you click on feedback up here. You'll see this screen pop up. All you have to do to start one of these sessions is click play. What happens from there is students then have access through a link to provide you with feedback related to the class that met that day. So let me say that again. It is a survey that's just designed to capture student impressions of what happened during a particular class meeting. That's done through 7 questions, 6 of which have to do with teaching that's being observed, and 1 asking students to report on whether or not they understood the material that was covered. It's designed to be taken in less than 2 minutes. The reports only go back to faculty. Nobody else can see these. It is solely a tool to be used by faculty, and it's kind of walled off in the system because of its formative nature. So this is something you can do optionally as much as you'd like, or as little as you'd like. It's really up to you. The kinds of reports that you get back, let me see if I've got a good one in here. Exist here in the system, but you also get an email notification once the session is closed. Well, and I thought I had one in here, but it looks like I didn't. But essentially, when you do have that data back from a feedback session, you'll see your results here in this tab. And if you're administering it multiple times across the semester, you'll actually end up with some longitudinal reporting here as well. One cool thing about this tool that we've been hearing from faculty is it gets students used to providing feedback. And I'm hearing from faculty that often when they're using this, they're finding that the feedback that they're getting back at the end of the semester, 1, typically has higher response rates, but 2, also it feels more relevant is what they've told me. It feels like students have gotten into a habit of providing the feedback and are better prepared to provide it at the end, which makes sense. The questions that we ask in this tool are from that larger group of questions in the end of course survey. And I just mentioned response rates, and so I kind of lied there in a second when I said I just needed to cover one more thing. I do want to end talking about response rates real quick, because as you all go through this transition, the single biggest fear most institutions have when transitioning from a paper to an online system is their response rates. Will they suffer? And a lot of that comes from historical experiences of institutions that have transitioned from paper to online and experience drops in response rates. So there's certainly some literature and case studies that cover examples of that. So I want to talk real quickly about a few things that we've found help ensure that you maintain a high response rate. And it really breaks down into 3 categories. So these are the things that we know to be true. The first is that if we create value, if we help our students understand how this information is used to affect our practice and how it's used institutionally to assess programs, to make operational decisions, the more likely they are to spend time providing it, right? So this value creation, actually explaining to students why this feedback is important. The big one I mentioned earlier, continue to do in-class capture. I can tell you the last 3 institutions that I've helped through the migration process that are doing just in-class capture all have mid 90% response rates institutionally. Across the institution, they have higher response rates now than they did with paper, and that's all they're doing is this in-class capture. The third is to monitor, revisit, and reinforce the response rate. And by that, what I mean is here in the system, you now have the ability to monitor your response rate while it's still active. So while students are still taking the survey, this number changes. So if you administer some time in class to do the survey on a Tuesday, and you meet again on Thursday and you're at 70% and you're not happy with that, you can tell students that they can still go back in and complete it if you'd like, up to you, but that's one way you can improve the response rate. Those are really the 3 big ones. Again, this idea of value creation, creating time in class for them to respond, and then monitoring the response rate as well. Those are really the principal ones. All right, and so just because I couldn't show this within the live system, just real quick, I'm gonna snap back a little bit to the longitudinal reports that come out of the feedback instrument. You will notice this is what they look like. Essentially, did they understand the material? What teaching methods did they observe? And you can see those trends over time. There's one thing worth noting here that I did not mention when we were looking at this initially. Your end of course surveys are anonymous. The feedback instrument that you use during class is not currently anonymous. It is designed to provide you with the ability to intervene if a student is consistently indicating they are not getting the material. So it's important to note that. I think it's important to communicate that to students if you're going to use this instrument. There's nothing in it, you know, there's no open-ended comment box where they could provide any kind of nasty comment or anything. But I think it's important for them to understand that their feedback can get tied back to them. All right, and so that's everything that I needed to cover. We've got time for questions, and I've seen a couple come in through chat here. Real quick, so I'm going to respond to those. But for those of you in a room that have been following along, we'll be able to unmute here in just a second and take your questions as well. So the first question comes from John. The question is there a target response to have enough data? So I imagine, John, the question has to do with, or I'm sorry, a target response rate to have enough data. Now, there are some general pieces of guidance I can give that relate to reliability. So the reliability of your data increases with the response rate. The more representative those that have responded are, the more representative of the population they will be. So one way to increase reliability is to increase the response rate itself. We don't provide a minimum number. Historically, you might remember that IDEA would say on your paper reports 65%. So you may remember that, right? That's something that we used to say, get a 65% response rate, you're good to go. That rate though had that guidance though had the unintended consequence of a number of institutions disregarding data that was coming in at, or data for course sections that had a response rate lower than that. So now we don't provide that guidance, and I'll tell you why. With respect to summative personnel decisions, you certainly need a sufficient number of course sections to make any kind of summative evaluation, something related to like your annual evaluation, promotion, tenure. We generally say 6 to 8 courses minimum for something like that. On the flip side though, for formative purposes, there really is no minimum. So for formative purposes, a single piece of student feedback could have implications for how you approach your course. And so it depends on what you're using the feedback for. For you, as a faculty member, incorporating this information into your own reflective practice and thinking about what you want to do differently the next time, no minimum response rate necessary. For summative personnel decisions, if you're a faculty member serving on a tenure and promotion committee or something like that, certainly we have some guidance related to best practices there, and I can send that along following the session and would welcome a more detailed conversation about it at a later date. It's a pretty lengthy topic to get into, but I hope that got at the heart of the question, John. Let me know if not, go ahead and type there if not. And then I'm gonna open it up now to anybody in the room that has questions as well.
I see names over here to the right. What is that?
Okay. Oh, we were on. Now you're on. Okay.
Could you go back and show us the screen program and the surveys from My Learning?
Could you repeat that a little closer to the mic? I had trouble hearing it.
Where should I be talking?
Right. Here's the mic.
Yeah, sorry. Would you mind going back to the screen you showed that showed what it will look like when a student gets the link within My Learning? I would like to see that again if we could, just to see what they're going to be seeing when we direct them to go there. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
it does. I'm not sure if Chase has access to that, but if Chase, do you have access to what our students would see? I know Wes, can you explain what the students will see in My Learning?
I'm not sure what they would.
It's under
You go to
tools.
tools.
Yeah, so at the top where they go to tools, and then under tools, Wes has added a category that says idea evaluations, and they just click there,
Yeah,
right?
they access through a link.
Yeah,
the link
so-
right in the toolbar under My Tools.
So we'll be telling them that, or the link will go right to there?
Well, students will be getting an email announcement that will explain, that will provide them with the link and also explain that they can access it through My Learning. I'll send an email out to faculty as well as a reminder to let you know where they can access it. And it will also be posted on our webpage.
And Cammie, remind me, was that did you guys end up setting that up as single sign-on?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So in that case, this screen right here, they will only see if they go to the link. So if they are logged in My Learning and are clicking through, and you're correct, Cammie, I don't have a screenshot of that because it's within the system, but
Right.
they will not see this screen. They will only see this screen if they are, for instance, going to the link from an email, or they bookmark it or something like that.
Okay, and we'll make sure everybody has that information prior to April 23rd when it opens up to students.
All right, what other questions? I'm sitting here looking. Doesn't look like we're getting any others, but we can hang tight here for a second. I'm going to check the chat here also. All right, still nothing there. All right, if there's no questions, I'll open it up to comments, editorials, and fits of rage. All right, so BU204 TP is going to share. They said they've actually got it up where they can show you what that looks like. So I have stopped sharing.
Okay, just give me a
We got
second.
204 TP, you guys can share.
That's Joel.
Thanks.
There you go. And that's what that looks like.
Yeah, you just navigate over to My Tools, and there's a link for evaluations right there.
Okay.
Thank you, Joel.
You click on it, and if there were evaluations in this course, they would show up there.
Thank you. It's cool.
That's great. Thanks for the assist there, Joel. All right. Well, yeah. So thank you all for taking time to do this. I know if you're anything like me, you know, I'll attend a webinar like this. I'll get a basic sense of how things work. But then later on, what's going to happen is when I actually go to do what I need to do, I won't remember something. So feel free to take advantage of the resources on the IDEA website. Reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to answer questions. We're going to be having a little bit more a conversation later on once you all have some reports in the system where we'll spend some time talking about what the numbers mean and all that good fun stuff. So that's really it. Is there anything else there that needs to be added, Cammie, from your perspective or anybody else in any of the rooms there?
Not from mine, Chase. I think you've covered everything.
Okay. Oh, and I've got two other questions before we close for anybody that wants to hang tight. Somebody asked for the summative evaluation information you spoke of for promotion, tenure, evaluation, reliability. For the person that's asking that question, if you could just put your email address in the chat, I'll send that to you directly. Cammie, what you're going to end up getting is a series of links that are really relevant to what we talked about today, basically things for further reading if somebody really wants to dig in. And so it's going to have a list for distribution to everybody, but for a specific question like that, I can provide that to you individually as well. Second question has to do with if we do the in-class capture, do we leave the room as we did for the paper surveys? Now, I don't know, Cammie, you may be able to talk about if there's been a procedure established around that, but I can tell you that IDEA's guidance generally is, I shouldn't say generally, always is that you should leave the room as students are taking the surveys. Has the institution added anything to that guidance, Cammie?
We have not, but our standard procedure is that faculty should leave the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, you know, it's the same as with paper. You don't want any undue influence. You know, they don't want to worry about you looking over their shoulders or anything like that. But yeah, essentially what I say is because it's taken on a mobile device, treat it just like paper. All right. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your day. I know this isn't always the most enjoyable thing to spend your afternoon doing, but I always love talking about it, and all the folks there at your institution are great to work with. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with and see many of you virtually this time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chase.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.